Welcome back. Professor Jeffrey Sachs joins us today to discuss, well, seemingly the unraveling of the world. So thank you very much for coming back on.
These are dramatic moments, no question about it. Absolutely unbelievable.
Well, we are seeing now, though, that we've entered the second week of the war against Iran, and it's, well, the regime change operation is not going as planned, obviously. What do you see being the strategy of the United States now that they failed in the initial objective?
Strategy is a big word when it comes to Donald Trump. I don't think there is a strategy. We don't really know. And of course, at wartime, we will not be told what is going on behind the scenes, but what we can gather is a tremendous amount of confusion. A confusion about expectations of what would happen, a confusion about war aims, a confusion about the real situation on the ground. So fog of war is the usual simile. I think we are absolutely befogged right now when it comes to Washington. The only public outlet we have is Donald Trump's posts on Truth Social. These are the ravings of a madman, and this is also part of what we are experiencing. We have a war with great danger and complexity, and we have a president that is, in my view, mentally unhinged.
Well, I've repeatedly warned that, well, the illusion of escalation control is what could take us to a third world war, because this war is spreading fast and it's very much out of control. Indeed, it's not just a war in Iran. We see, of course, Iran taking credit for hitting US bases in several countries, yet it also denies the attack on Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey, which doesn't seem to make much sense and could be, of course, the US and Israel attempting to pull in proxies. Well, we don't know, but we do know that the US is arming and pulling Kurdish fighters as a proxy into the war. And there's now arguments that Russia is giving Iran intelligence, which I'm not sure is true, but it seems likely as the US gives Ukraine intelligence. And also, after the decapitation strikes on Iran, there is immense pressure on Moscow now to restore its deterrence from further NATO attacks, while the Europeans talk about more nuclear weapons in quantity and spreading it around. Are we already moving into a World War III here?
We are probably in the early days of World War III, and the question will be whether it is contained. But we're already in a global war because there's a war in the Western Hemisphere underway. And even as the attention is on Iran, Trump is signaling in his not so subtle way that the US will take Cuba. This could very well happen. The war in Ukraine, of course, continues. The war in the Middle East is now across the Middle East. The war between Pakistan and Afghanistan is perhaps somehow related to this. Iranian vessels, an Iranian naval vessel was sunk off the coast of India. And for all of these reasons, fighting is across the world. The fighting is at least loosely linked. We don't know how closely linked it is. Part of American strategy seems to be to try to corner and control the energy markets. This is not playing too well because the energy supplies are being blown up by the hour. And so we're entering also a worldwide energy crisis that is likely to be extremely serious. And as they say, it's not yet been priced into the markets. This is the usual way that cataclysmic global events are turned into financial jargon. But the point is, we're going to enter a an energy crisis that is extraordinarily severe as well. This will hurt Europe considerably. It will threaten Asian countries deeply. It will probably mean spreading war. So there's no doubt, by the way, or I shouldn't say no doubt. I'd be shocked, absolutely, if Russia and China were not supporting Iran. Why wouldn't they? They have a strategic relationship with Iran. China depends on Iran for oil. The United States is basically at war with China, and much of what the United States is doing is really aimed at China. For example, cutting off Venezuelan oil supplies to China, now aiming to cut off Russian oil supplies to China, though the waiver was just lifted because of the chaos, aiming to cut off Iranian supplies to China. So if China isn't supporting Iran, something's wrong with all our textbooks, that's for sure. If China were to stand by and let the U.S. take over the world, that would be quite strange.
Yeah, this efforts to take over the world energy markets, it's very blatant. I mean, I just watched a clip on Fox News where they have an interview going, well, yes, any price we're paying in this war will be outweighed by the massive benefits once we get control of Iran's oil as well. And well, it made me think about the article you wrote recently about arguing that the US-Israeli attack on Iran is also an attack on the United Nations. And indeed, well, international law obviously has been violated in the past, but now there doesn't even seem to be a pretense to abide by it. Indeed, there seems to be a pride in it. For example, Hegseth, he dismisses the rule of engagement as being politically correct and weak. So there seems to be almost direct efforts to dismantle international law, as you know, the Board of Peace more or less makes this clear. I was wondering if you can flesh out that argument.
Well, the U.S. government under Trump, but I would say more generally, but still to a dramatic extent under Trump, uh, despises the UN, wants to kill it, is aiming to kill it both through 1,000 cuts and through a devastating blow. If you believe that you are the world's hegemon, as Emperor Donald believes, then anything that tries in Lilliputian ways to hold you down is pathetic. So they want to smash the United Nations. And they've been absolutely clear about it. Earlier this year, the United States walked out of more than 30 UN agencies. The U.S. Has repudiated fundamental UN treaties and objectives. We've had an end of the nuclear arms control agreements, which were part of the UN system. The U.S. doesn't pay its bills to the United Nations. The U.S. doesn't respect the institutions of the United Nations. And it's clear, at least Trump and this U.S. government, and I would say the CIA and the deep state more generally, aim for global hegemony, and the UN is the opposite of that. Well, maybe not quite the opposite of it, but it's co-responsibility with other countries, and the U.S. does not accept co-responsibility with anybody. So everything that is being done completely sneers at the UN, and if the topic is raised, those are, as you said, whether it's by Hegseth or by the White House, those are pathetic niceties in a world of power. We've not really seen this kind of brutality of sentiment, of rhetoric, and of action since 1945. by anybody, by the way, whether it's by the Soviet Union or by the United States in an earlier vintage or by any other country, nothing remotely close to this. I calculate each year with my colleagues an index of UN-aligned multilateralism, which we report annually in a report called the Sustainable Development Report. And even before this war, the United States, far and away, and not even close, Glenn, was the least aligned with the United Nations of all 193 UN member states in terms of engagement with UN processes, including votes in the General Assembly, where the US almost always votes in a tiny minority with Israel and Paraguay and a couple of other countries against the will of the rest of the world, in terms of not signing treaties or leaving treaties. The US is simply rogue or out to destroy the UN. Let's put it that way. And this is all accelerated in recent weeks. What is disturbing, if I could use a light term, because I love to use stronger terms, Europe is completely complicit in this. Europe doesn't show one morsel of support for the UN system, processes, or most importantly, the UN Charter. The core of the UN Charter, the very purpose that you find in the preamble and then in the opening articles, is to stop the use of force and the threat of force by one nation against another nation. This is the essence of the whole UN system. Article 2, paragraph 4 of the UN Charter, which I encourage people to go online and read, says that no nation may threaten force or use force against another nation. It's simple. And as the opening words of the UN Charter make clear, this is to prevent the scourge of war. Well, we have a US president who does believe that the US rules the world and that violence is a core instrument of ruling the world, and that if countries don't accede to US demands, what Trump calls unconditional surrender, with Trump picking the new leader of Iran, well, then force will be continued until that outcome occurs. It's in the mold of Hitler or Napoleon or other delusional actors who thought that they could rule. But even in those earlier cases, they did not believe that they ruled the world. They aimed to rule their neighborhood. They aimed to rule Europe. Hitler aimed for living space in the Slavic lands. Trump's rhetoric and behavior is that he believes that he rules the world. By the way, he believes it at a personalistic level, as well as at a political level. And I'm not exaggerating, and it's not Trump delusion syndrome. It's just the overt behavior. The man's loony, and you can watch it. He's got every trait of megalomania, grandiosity, narcissism, and it's quite clear, by the way, that the U.S. Governmental processes, where U.S. foreign policy is typically run by the CIA, is a little bit being run ragged right now, because they can't keep up with this madness. So there's a lot of unpredictability and a lot of danger in what's happening, because we have a mix of U.S. normal grandiosity, which is a deep trait of the United States. It was true during Bush Jr., Obama, and Biden. But with Trump, it adds the usual U.S. institutional grandiosity and militarism with a personal level delusion of leaders. We know this through history. This is not for the first time. It is for the first time, though, in the nuclear age. We've never had a circumstance like this in the nuclear age. And I would say the world is in a more dangerous situation than it has ever been, period.